Thank you, Laetitia and Rhoda, for the presentation. So I will present a kind of summary of work done during the NESTORE project for developing modeling tools at different spatial scales. This involved a lot of people. I probably forgot some of them, but you already have a long list. I was the scientific responsible of this project from Université of Caen and CNRS. I am personally a CNRS researcher. And but we also had numerous collaborations in this work with France Énergie Marine, Natural Science, the RBINS in Brussels, and also universities of Brest and Marseille. Oops. The question of cumulative effects can be seen as a series of chains of effect together. A chain of effect was defined by Knight in 2013 as a chain from one activity to one pressure, so a change in our ecosystem, to a variable describing a biological target. So, for example, we can say that offshore wind farm producing noise at construction can influence the abundance of gray seal or the audition of marine porpoise, for example. And so when we have those effects, those chains of effect, the question is how to study them together to see how they accumulate. And so different patterns can occur. For example, if you have different activities, like, for example, here what I see on the network of multiple activities, you can have offshore wind farm producing noise, but also aggregate extraction producing sediment turbidity, etc., etc. But you can also have studies that study one activity, like offshore wind farm development, and several pressures like noise, artificial reef effect, etc. So the question is how to deal with those multiple pressures and how to study their effect. And so the question is how to use ecosystem models, and this was the subject of developing those use, to combine those effects together. So, for example, here in this scheme, you have one event in yellow that has an effect, for example, on the abundance of the seal, and then you have another event, and you wonder if, when you have those two events happening together in your simulations, the cumulative effect would be additive, or more than that, synergetic, or less than that, dampened, or in opposite directions, and we call that antagonistics. So you have several tools to do this ecosystem modeling and go into this cumulative effect analysis. So you have different targets, like I said, the abundance of gray seal, but it could be also the recycling of the ecosystem, that it is what we call an ecological network analysis index, because it characterizes the ecosystem globally. And then you can use EcoPass. And then in EcoPass, for example, if you study the recycling, you can compare two situations, for example, before, after the construction of an offshore wind farm, and compare one value of recycling. Then you have some statistical method, like, for example, the linear inverse modeling, what we call LIM MCMC, that allows you to make statistical comparisons. So it's a static model. It's a mean model for a mean year, for example, a mean square meter or square kilometer. But you have this statistical distribution. And then you have EcoSim that allows you to project this in year by year, and EcoSpace that allows you to do maps year by year of those biological target indices. Here in the NESTORE project, we we wanted to combine all those tools together, adding also another one, osmose, which is also a temporal and spatial model like ecospace, to go into comparisons. And this will go until the presentation of Raphaël Girardin, just after me, who studied, who compared the model and to evaluate the uncertainty of the modeling choices. So the first model that I will present today is the LIM model. This static and statistical model is an optimization analysis which takes quite a long time to stabilize. And for this, the first action realized into NESTORE with the team of the LMNO and others, which is a mathematical lab in Caen. An alternative algorithm was developed to gain time, but also several computational algorithms were evaluated. And also we added in this sample lim new R code some also evaluation indices to evaluate if the solution, the mathematical solution, is sound on a mathematical point of view. So we had the first paper comparing with Valérie Girardin, the first author, comparing 3 types of metabolic networks, food webs, but also urban metabolic networks and biochemical ones. And from those 3 examples, we demonstrated that the sample lim was gaining time, but also gathering a better evaluation. The evaluation gave a better result for those solutions. Then we applied this new sample lim code to food web models that were developed with our colleagues from the Brussels Museum. And we studied them on the Belgian offshore wind farm case. We wanted to study before-after studies, but the model were under development by Emile de Borger, but we decided to compare inside and outside with similar habitats of those Belgian examples to test the sensitivity of isotopic data on this evaluation of the properties of the system, like this recycling I talked about. And so it's because of this gain of time with the sample lim that we could do multiple tests necessary for this sensitivity analysis. What was also done was testing how we could force a lim model with, in Courseulles-sur-Mer this time, with outputs from hydrodynamic and Lagrangian particle tracking modeling. So this is what was developed in NESTORE, but this lim model was also completed with these spatial models, ecospace and osmose. So here you have this representation. I will let Raphaël talk about the result with osmose, but I will give you a few conclusions from those ecospace models developed. Those ecospace models are developed with 2 models at different scales. So we had this lim model at the smallest scale, local scale, but then we developed model at the scale of the Bay of Seine, for example, at the scale of the Eastern English Channel, and then this big model you see here in blue with also the Eastern English Channel and the Southern North Sea. You have also 2 models in the Bay of Biscay and one in the Gulf of Lion that was modified in NESTORE. It was developed just before. So if we take the South Brittany case studies, we tested how we could reduce the size of the cells to study really what was happening around the turbines. So what Marie Le Marchand did in this study was to demonstrate that we could go with very small scales to study, for example, the distance between turbines, how it influences the network properties, or how if the fishing practice changed. And her main conclusions were that benthic invertebrates were more influenced by the distance between wind turbines than by the fishing practice. And fish were more influenced by the fishing practice than the distance between wind turbines. But mostly we demonstrated that we could make those eco-space models with small cells. And then this big model that was first developed by Emma Arrhenius, and she continued during this NESTORE project, was a model used to test multiple activities. So not only offshore wind farm development, but several pressures inside offshore wind farm development, but also aggregate extractions and the climate change effect on the distribution area of species. But also she could, she and the team around her could go into testing measures like mitigation measures, for example, on noise to evaluate the effect on the ecosystem functioning. And also, together with Lise Dulieu, the steps of multiplication of the number of parks in the offshore wind farms. So some conclusion from their nice job was to say that rapid successions of construction phases were amplifying the impacts observed. And also that the attenuation, the mitigation measure tested on noise reduced the fluctuation in biomasses. And finally, that the biofouling and fishing restrictions led to a slight regional oversea biomass increase, but a catch decrease. But then some complementary studies were done inside a smaller model, a regional model, but only on the French area of, on the Eastern English Channel. So it's in French and UK waters. And here some more work was done with Quentin Nogues on noise and sedimentary suspension during construction phase, and also different scenarios by Pierre Bourdeau of fishing restrictions during the construction and operational phases. Their main conclusions were that total fish biomass and catches slightly reduced at regional scale, especially for cuttlefish, herring, and red mullets. Most significant impacts were during the construction phase, and no common patterns of offshore wind farm scale could be established. So it's very important to study locally also each local conditions and the consequences for the ecosystem. And then the last scenarios I wanted to present were those made with Daniela Bayeru and Thomas Heyer from on the Gulf of Lion model. So within NESTORE, the first model established in the PhD of Thomas were developed with an improvement mainly done on the megafauna, marine mammals and seabirds, but also on fishery representation and testing different wind farm configurations with different biofouling levels and fishery management measures. And their conclusion were that moderate biomass changes at local scale were observed with negligible modification for marine megafauna, but potential high local biomass change, especially concerning the benthic invertebrates and cephalopods. And then concerning the spillover effect, these were observed near farm boundaries. So just to retain a few conclusions of all this big work, we can say that we really had a new code for the linear inverse models, allowing a gain of time and new assessment tools of the quality of the results, which is opening to new applications like the sensitivity analysis I showed, and also this work on the physics and biological coupling. The conclusion of the sensitivity analysis is that it's very important to have isotopic data. So it would be really nice if this could become something done in the monitorings of the offshore wind farm effects. But more development now is needed to connect better the physics and the food webs, especially to understand how the food web reacts to connectivity changes, but also how the primary production of the phytoplankton reacts to those changes in the physics. The ecospace models were further developed compared to the previous project we had with France Énergie Marine. So you can see that we go very far in the cumulative effect estimations, taking into account several pressures associated to offshore wind farms, several steps in the development in the French waters. But I have to say we have to be careful with those conclusions because it is a purely food web point of view, which has to be balanced with other points of view, like, for example, the genetics that may interact with evolution questions or other characterization of ecosystem health. So what I would say to conclude is that the project NESTORE shows how important it is that we have a toolbox with with different models, each one having its own properties, and this allows the user to adapt the choice of the model to the constraints and the question and the scales of interest. And then I will let the floor to Raphaël Girardin to present how we use those model outputs for uncertainty evaluation.